Hello record people, hello music lovers. Welcome back to my channel. In my last video I talked about psychedelic folk music from the British Isles. I showed some cool records and talked about everything there. And that video really took off. I have now over 10,000 views on that video, and that is mind bonkers. So I was really glad that so many people tuned into that video, and I got lots and lots of comments, and I got lots of new subscribers as well. So welcome aboard to all of you who are new subscribers. Some of the comments wanted me to show some acid folk or psychedelic folk from America, because there are tons of great music in this genre from over there. So in this video I'm going to focus on American psychedelic folk music and show some records from my collection that I think are really great. And if you're interested in this acid folk music, I strongly suggest that you go over to Dom Seeking a Threads channel. He has a video called ABCs of Psych with acid folk, where he shows some great acid folk records as well. I'll put a link down in the description to that video, so go over to Dom and check that out. American psychedelic folk music and British psychedelic folk music. They were two kind of separate things, even though they had many similarities. In America, they had different types of roots. They had the blues, the country music, and the Woody Guthrie type folk singer route with, protest singers and a lot of these Greenwich Village, New York singer-songwriters, folk artists. So they came from that kind of background. But when Bob Dylan plugged in his guitar and played electric, and the Byrds starting to do like more folk rock, it opened up a new world to all the folkies in America. And that combined with like the LSD culture from San Francisco and everything that was happening in the counterculture, it kind of formed the folk artists in America to starting to do their own more experimental and more free kind of folk music. And that kind of became psychedelic folk music in America. So when we're talking about American psychedelic folk or acid folk, there's one artist that I just have to mention. And it's an artist called Pearls Before Swine. And this is their 1967 release, One Nation Underground, with this cover with a detail from Euronymous Bosch, Garden of Earthly Delight. A lot of weird things going on in this painting. There's the back. So no band name or anything on this cover. The frontman in this band is called Tom Rapp. And he was basically the songwriter and the lyricist, and he kind of created this band, but they were a band. It was recorded in May 1967 during a couple of days, and was released with these labels on ESP disc. So this is a type of folk music that are really psychedelic. The songs here are largely acoustic, but they sometimes use drums and electric bass, sometimes organ, and they create this almost surreal, dreamlike lullabies, kind of trippy in parts. So this is often used as an example to describe acid folk. And actually, the first time the term acid folk was used was in 1969, by an Australian journalist that used the term acid folk to describe the music of Pearls Before Swine. So that's where the term was coined. But it wasn't very much used back in the days. Acid folk is a term that has been more and more used over the years. They came in a lot of different cover versions. This one is the like brown sepia colored. There are black and white versions, and there are color versions, sometimes with a band name on, and so on. But all releases came in 1967, and I'm really not sure in what order they came. I have this copy and it's from 1967. Probably not the first one, but it's okay for me. And Perth before Swine did some great albums after this as well. After a little while they turned away from the psychedelic and became just like great singer-songwriter music. And I love their LPs up to the early 70s that they did. So a great band, and Tom Rapp was a unique songwriter and he had a really cool style. The next LP is an absolute cornerstone when it comes to acid folk in America. And often, if you ask people what is acid folk, they're probably gonna show this record or use it as an example. And this is Linda Perhacs' album Parallelograms that came out in 1970 on Kapp labels in this lovely artwork here. Backside with the lyrics handwritten beautifully. This is a promotional copy, not for sale stamp there that I have. There are two versions of this release. This is the more common one with the kind of pink, orange, red labels. It was also released with black labels, and those are more rare, but they came at the same time as far as I know, so they are both like first presses. And Dom showed this album in his video as well, but it's worth showing again, I think. This LP is basically a singer-songwriter LP, but it has some psychedelic elements in it as well. She was working as a dentist hygienist in Beverly Hills. One of her customers were this music composer for film and for TV, and his name was Leonard Rosenman. She gave him demo tapes and he listened to them, and he signed her and wanted to produce her songs because he thought that this was really interesting music. And they recorded this album together. And they are often using this like multi-layered vocals, harmony vocals that creates like soundscapes. Besides all these layered vocals, they use some electronics and some effects like echoes and stuff to create a really beautiful, spacey production. So this is very much like an acid folk album, at least some of the tracks are. Some of the tracks goes into more like traditional, think of Joni Mitchell type singer-songwriter music from the time. But some other songs really takes off and are really, really beautiful. The next album is also a classic in the genre, and it's also an album that Dom showed in his video, but this is such a classic, so I thought I would show my copy as well, you know. And this is Red Hash by Gary Higgins, hippie guy with a lot of hair and beard, and back cover looks like this. Really psychedelic, trippy artwork there. The labels look like this, and it was released privately on his own label called Nufusmoon. And this guy, Gary Higgins, he was, before this, he was in New York playing in different bands. He had a band together with some members from Silver Apples when they were like banging out psychedelic music in New York. But he wanted to live a more quiet life in the country, so he moved out to Connecticut, where he lived peacefully close to nature and wrote songs and smoked some dope. And actually, because of that, he got arrested for the possession of marijuana. And Gary was actually sent to 2.5 years in prison or something. Totally crazy. But anyway, he was sentenced to prison, and he thought that this might be my last chance to record an album before I have to do my time in prison. So he recorded this album before he went to jail. He released it privately in, I think, a couple of thousand copies maybe, and that it came out when he was in prison. So, of course, when he wasn't around to promote this album, it kind of disappeared. And when he got out of jail, he forgot about his musical past. He put that behind him, formed a family, became like a carpenter or something, and lived a quiet, normal life. But over time, this LP gained like a cult following, and many collectors started to look for this original pressing because they found a great psychedelic folk LP. Really hippie-ish vibe and everything that collectors are looking for. And no one knew where Gary was or how to contact him or anything, so it was like a lost LP from a forgotten time or something. Anyway, this is going to be a long story, but they wanted to reissue this badly at the record label Drag City. So they start to search for Gary to see if they could find him. And the first thing they did was that on one of their artists, 6 Organs of Admittance, they recorded a cover of the first song here, Thicker Than a Smoky. And in the liner notes on the CD, they asked, if anyone knows anything about Gary Higgins, please contact Drag City. But no one saw that little liner note on that CD. So they continued the search by looking up in phone books and everything to search for everyone that was named Gary Higgins, and sent out letters to people named Gary Higgins just to see if they could track him down. Eventually, they found him, and they were able to reissue this LP legally. So it's on Drag City if you want to pick up a copy. And after that, I think Gary started to perform live again, and maybe he has even recorded more music. I'm not really sure, but so it's a kind of fascinating story of how this LP was made, and people forgot about it and then discovered it again. Let's take a listen to this beautiful hippie folk record. The next LP is also quite an obscure album that I wanted to highlight. And it's an album by an artist called Bob Ray. And this is his album called Initiation of a Mystic. My copy has some sticker removal here. Too bad. But anyway, it was released in a gatefold cover. Some images of him. Some hefty mustache he's got there. Was released on a label called Soul City with these labels. And it was released in 1970. Bob Ray, he was famous for being a session musician. He had played bass with Donovan. He's the one who plays bass on Seasons of the Witch and some other tracks. And he was also in a band called Thornshield. That was more kind of a West Coast sunshine pop band. But he had the chance to release a solo album in 1970. This album is a mix of kind of acid folk songs with some flutes and also with some West Coast psychedelic pop songs. To me, it reminds me a little bit about Jim Sullivan's UFO album, orchestrated West Coast pop. And he sometimes he sounds a little bit like Donovan, of course. I think he was influenced by Donovan a lot. And it has a great production, this LP. A lot of great musicians were playing. I think he got help from members from the Wrecking Crew in LA to play as backing band. So great production, great musicians and everything. Well worth picking up.
Look, see the girl with the cameo ring on her finger. Whispers a word full of magic, and the sound flows within her. Morning magician is chanting some phrases from Zion.
Now it's time for another LP that is considered to be a super classic in the genre. And this is Skip Spence Or, that came out in 1969. And this is a very, very out there psychedelic folk LP by Skip Spence. Skip Spence played with Jefferson Airplane, and later on he formed Moby Grape. But at the end of his time with Moby Grape, he was really heavy into LSD and drugs, and he had some mental issues as well, I would guess. And he started to become interested in the occult and stuff like that. And so he was like slightly going mad. So much that he freaked out one night and took an axe and attacked the hotel room to the producer of one of the Moby Grape's album. And then he went after the other members in Moby Grape with an axe. So, and the police in New York, they took him in and put him eventually in like a mental asylum or something like that, where he stayed for 6 months or something before they released him. So after his mental breakdown, he got released from the hospital, and he drove down to Nashville. And there he recorded this whole album all by himself together with a recording engineer. He played all the instruments, he played everything by himself, and he created an absolutely fantastic LP. This is, here you can see him in the studio there. The songs here ranges from like country songs with his really deep voice, to blues songs, to trippy songs, to experimental folk songs, and a lot of different things going on here. It's a very like personal, deep, unsettling at times, and I think it's an absolutely brilliant record. And it was released on Columbia Records, and the rumor says that this is the worst selling album ever released on Columbia. I'm not sure if it's true or so, but what we have here is an absolute gem of a record. I simply love it. Maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's fantastic.
A cripple on his deathbed in a daydream did ride, while past the streams of thought on a pedal path did glide. He left his wheelchair spinning deeper in the mud, and it sent his memories in its body and its blood.
Many of the records that I've shown today has a totally wild backstory to it. We have Gary Higgins who went to prison, and we have the story about Skip Spence that you just heard. But I think this next record has the most crazy story of them all. And it's Chris Lucey with the album Songs of Protest and Anti-Protest. This album was released as early as 1965, but it has some songs that still could be considered psychedelic. And I'm going to tell you the story here. This record label, they had signed a deal with an artist called Chris Lucey with a D. Here it said Lucey, but they had signed with another artist called Chris Lucey. And Chris Lucey were like a West Coast musician, songwriter. He was associated with Craig Smith, that later on became Maitreya Kali, and he also played with the Penny Arcade Band. It was this Chris Lucey that was supposed to release this record. So the record label, they printed up like artwork for the cover, and they, as you can see here, they printed all the song titles on the front cover here. And so they had prepared this artwork. And then Chris Lucey, he dropped out and said, I don't want to be part of this anymore. So the record label, they had this album cover, but they didn't have an artist or any songs. So they picked up a local musician, songwriter called Bobby Jameson, and they asked him to write and record these songs with these song titles. So he basically was assigned to write songs with these song titles, so they didn't have to redo the cover art. So he went into the studio and recorded a full album with those song titles. But the record label couldn't release it as Chris Lucey because he had dropped out of the project. So they retouched this and changed this from Chris Lucey to Chris Lucey, and then they pressed up the record that we have here. So the real artist here is called Bobby Jameson, but it says Chris Lucey here, and it was supposed to be released by a guy called Chris Lucey. Confusing? Yes, I know, but it's totally crazy story that says something about how the record industry worked in the 60s. Anyway, now to the music here. This is like a folk album, but it's going towards more easy listening music actually, with some really trippy productions, some vibraphones and his 12-string guitars, and some of the songs are really has these dreamy qualities that we are looking for when it comes to psychedelic folk. So a really cool LP with some early psychedelic folk music in it, and also with a totally bonkers backstory. This album has been showed many times by many people in the VC, and every time someone tells the story, I'm totally confused afterwards, and you are probably confused now. Basically, it's an album by Bobby Jameson under the name Chris Lucey.
I've walked alone in meadows where the grass was tall as I. I've thought a lot about her and sometimes even cried. Oh, the love I grew so fond of is gone away with time. She's the girl from Vernon Mountain. She'll never leave my...
The last LP I'm gonna show is by an artist from Canada called Perth County Conspiracy, who released this LP in 1970 called Perth County Conspiracy Does Not Exist. Ooh, very trippy title. They were a band, but most of the music was made by two guys called Richard Keelan and Cedric Smith. And it was released in this nice gatefold cover. There's the back here. And it also had an insert here. You can fold up like this. This is a Canadian release on the 2i Columbia. This album is an absolutely fantastic psychedelic LP, and it has so many great tracks. So this whole LP feels a bit like a journey, like a trip or something, and often between the songs there are some spoken words or sound effects or poetry reading. They read like Dylan Thomas and Shakespeare and stuff between the tracks. And some tracks, a little bit annoyingly, have some little bit too much of sound effects. For instance, that there's a really quiet song that you really get in the mood, and all of a sudden you hear like a gunshot that wakes you up. So that's not so nice, but the songs here are just fantastic, dreamy, psychedelic folk music by these two guys. I've done an Acid Archive Diaries video where I showed their second release that was only made for Canadian radio, and I will put a link in the description to that video if you want to see it. But that's another story. So this is the last one I want to show, Perth County Conspiracy. Highly recommended band and highly recommended LP.
From fears till others generate. Easy Rider is a true story. Easy Rider isn't easy to take. Easy Rider is a true story. Easy Rider isn't easy to take.
So these were a few examples of psychedelic folk from my collection from USA and from Canada. There's so much great acid folk from America. I could made a much longer video. And also in America, after this first wave of hippie folk, the music continues through the 70s throughout private presses, where people in basements all around America continue to do this like psychedelic folk music and folk rock and stuff like that. Yeah, it has been fun to dig out my American psych folk records, revisiting some of them. I had these records for quite some time, so some of them weren't like fresh in my memory, so it has been really fun to listen to all these records again. Anyway, please put down a comment if you want to, and like and subscribe and all that if you want. Always nice to get comments and see the discussion going. I got so many comments on my last video and I tried to respond to everyone. So thanks everyone for keeping the conversation going after the video. But anyway, thanks you very much for tuning in, and until next time, take care out there and listen to music, buy records, and be cool, stay in school. Peace.